Hello friends and neighbors, Ray Harwood here. I'm your HOA coach. In this technical session, I'm going to talk about Zoom and the features that a host would use during the meeting. I'm going to have another video on setting up meetings and another video for participants. This video is to cover the wide range of features that are available to hosts during the meeting. Let's get started. Now in this session, I'm assuming that you've already started your meeting and you may have one of several screens up. I happen to have a pretty nice setup of 4 monitors. Now, if there's a way for you to get multiple monitors, I highly recommend doing that. You may end up seeing any one of these screens at a particular time. This is the first informational screen that you see when Zoom pops up. And you may see a screen that shows your camera or cameras of other people. And you might still have the screen where you actually clicked join in order to get to the meeting. So from this screen up here, you know that once your cursor is in the screen, you can unmute yourself or you can start your video. And I'm going to start my video. And so I now see my camera from both screens. I can see this one, which you can see just has my name down in the bottom, and then this one, which if I move around, actually does have the pop-up menu. One of the things I'm going to do is join this meeting from my iPhone, and that way we'll have a participant. It'll be me, but you get the point. We'll have a participant that we can affect as a host. So hang on a second. All right, so now you see that there are 2 participants there. And if I click on that, you can see that my iPhone is here and I am in the waiting room. Now there's several options for security that Zoom has had in place, several that they've added fairly recently. These are things that sometimes get in the way of meetings, sometimes they're very helpful. So we'll talk about that as we go along. In this particular case, I'm going to admit my iPhone self into the room. So there we are now. We see the participant screen and I have let myself into the room, and there's my iPhone X name. I've not put in a specific icon or avatar or anything. So what I can do on my iPhone over here as a participant is I'll start the video. That's me from the iPhone over there. Here are a few things that I think are important. If you click the security button here, you get a couple of pop-ups. Now, when the meeting was created, we had the option to enable a password. We had the option to enable waiting rooms. Now, we can turn on and off the waiting rooms, but we can't turn off the password. Hey there, so a little later I figured out there is a way to remove the password from a current meeting. You have to log on to Zoom with another device and disable the password requirement. And then people can get in without the password. But you can't do it from the meeting controls on the meeting that you're currently in. You have to go to another device in order to do that. Here you can enable the waiting room or you can turn the waiting room off. So if you decide, look, we're going to have a whole bunch of people coming in and I don't want to deal with the waiting room like I just had to when I dialed in from my iPhone, you can turn it off and you just unclick it and you've disabled the waiting room. Anyone then who joins your meeting comes right in. And so if you have some unruly people or the potential for unruly people, enabling the waiting room is probably a good idea. Another interesting feature then is the lock meeting. And if you lock the meeting, nobody can join the meeting. Now, does this mean that nobody can come into the waiting room? Hey there. I did a little bit of research after I did the main recording for this, and I figured out that locking the room doesn't allow anybody to come into the waiting room, but if they're already in the waiting room, they get to stay. Might not make a big difference to you, but I thought I'd mention it here. One of the things that you'll see when you lock the meeting is that if you click the invite button, it'll say the meeting has been locked by the host. You can't even send an invite when the meeting is locked. So you have to unlock the meeting, and then you can open up the invitation panel and do a couple of things with it if you need to. So there are a couple of other options there. Allow participants to share screen. So maybe you don't want your participants to be able to grab the screen and share it. It's kind of interesting. The way Zoom does it, they actually allow multiple people to share screens at the same time. You can also turn on and off chat, and you can also allow them to rename themselves. You, as the host, can change the name at any time. This is a good way to make sure that people don't just come in, and especially if they dial in, you go, who just rang in? Oh, that's John Smith. You can actually go in and change the name to John Smith, and that way you know who they are. Two more options down here in this part of the menu. Remove participant. If they are unruly or don't belong, you can remove them. Be careful using this particular option, because if you remove the participant, they can't get back in the room. If you shut down the meeting and start one of these recurring meetings over again later, they'll be able to join. It's not a forever ban, but it's a ban during this particular session of your meeting. Report is another thing that if you have some people who are invading your room that shouldn't be there, that are just being obnoxious, and there's no way you can get rid of them because they keep coming back or whatever, report actually sends something up to the Zoom folks, and they'll look into that particular individual or IP address or something and try and keep them from invading other people's meetings and yours. One of the things that you're hopefully aware of, it's going to be confusing because you're seeing me in both cases, but the one that I'm pointing my finger at, the one you see right now, is my iPhone. If I unmute and I'm talking over here, now you see my particular, which camera is it? It's hard to tell, but when the faces are different, you'll be able to figure it out. I'm going to stick with the iPhone camera, okay? I'm going to work here briefly with the participant screen. First thing you'll notice is the ability to unmute yourself. This is me, the person who is hosting the meeting. This then is one of my participants. I can mute that participant, and you can see that the participant's little microphone goes to red, which basically means that they are muted. If they go in and stop their video, you'll notice that their video camera turns red. And I'll go back and start that so you can see. I will also leave that unmuted. I can mute. I can unmute. And when I do that, there is a screen that pops up that says the host would like you to unmute. So when you unmute an individual, you are basically signaling to them that you would like them to unmute. They can either click stay muted or unmute, in which case they will be unmuted. Now we do have the invite button here, and it does bring up a window. There's a place then to find them in your contacts, send them in an email. There is the meeting ID. There is the meeting password. You can copy an invite link. You can copy the invitation. You can copy and paste it into an email. A variety of things that you can do with that. Mute all will give you a window that says the current and new participants will be muted. Do you want to allow them to unmute themselves? Again, if you've got an unruly crowd and they're unmuting themselves and being obnoxious, you can basically uncheck that and say, yes, we want them to be muted. Everyone is now muted. I can unmute myself so you can know that they can hear you, but they cannot unmute themselves. If I go in and click the unmute, the host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves. If you don't want to unmute everybody, but you'd like to give people the opportunity to unmute themselves, you go here to the little three dots, and where it says allow participants to unmute themselves, you check that now, and participants, like over here, I can say unmute, and the iPhone user is the one talking now. So let's go over the options here from the Ellipsis menu. Mute participant upon entry. In other words, when they come in, you don't necessarily, if you're having a serious meeting, you don't necessarily want everyone who comes in to be able to have all the background noise and all the other things that happen. And you might want to put in your meeting notice that you'll mute participants on entry, and that way they know that they need to unmute themselves when they come in. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Allow participants to rename themselves. Talked about this a little bit earlier. To allow them to change their name, like if they are logged in on an account where they have something unusual, like I've got HOA coach, I can actually come in here and rename myself Ray the host, and it renames me. I can also rename this other participant, Ray the participant. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. All right, so, and you can see down here, Ray the participant, and if we go over here to my other screen, you can see Ray the host down there in the corner. The other thing that was in there was enable waiting room. You can turn that off so that people can simply join directly. You can lock the meeting from there, and if you remember, we had the lock the meeting from over here as well. So enable waiting room and lock meeting are here, and they are also here. All right, so that is the participant screen and the things that are there. So this pop-up bar here is kind of interesting. I'm going to put up a Word document which has some of my notes, and so I'm going to use the share screen. Notice there's an up arrow for share screen, which allows one participant can share at a time, or multiple participants can share simultaneously. There's some advanced sharing options. Who can share? Only the host. Who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? A couple of options there. I'm going to start this, and you can see that I'm going to pick the screen with my Word document, and I'm going to hit share. Now what you'll notice here is that along the border of this window is a green outline, and that tells you that this window is the one being shared. You need to know, especially if you've got multiple screens, which window is being shared at any one particular time. And that's how you know that window sharing is working, and how you know which window is being shared. On my screen, I have this bar. And this bar is like an overlay. It sits on top of your screen underneath, and when you hover over it, gives you a couple of options. Now you have access to your own mute, unmute, video, security, the participants. There are also polls, a new share if you want to share something else. You can click the annotate button, which will give you a screen which now you can draw on the screen. And these are like done on an overlay, which you can then come in and clear those drawings. So if you want to highlight something, you can do that, and then you can clear that as well. With the more, you have the chat control. So if you want to do some chatting with participants, you can do that. You can record on this computer. You can record to the cloud. You can disable participants annotation. In other words, you can try drawing on my screen, but it's not going to work. Show the names of the annotators. This is pretty good, so you can tell who is actually annotating the document. Hide the floating meeting controls. Now look here, Control-Alt-Shift-H. If I do that, the active one disappears. Now I can press escape and they'll come back, but I can Control Alt Shift and H and make that come and go away. Also here is share computer sound, and so ordinarily only your chosen microphone goes out to the other participants. With share computer sound, if you're going to do some other things with your computer, it's going to play a video, or you want to hear sounds that come out of an application, that's the way you do that. And then this one, optimize share for full screen video clip. So if you are showing a YouTube video or some other type of full screen video, you want to select that during the presentation portion where you're doing that, and it will optimize your video so that everyone can see the video cleanly. And here's a place for end the meeting. Always be careful with that, because if you accidentally end the meeting and people are in there participating and they are not hosts and they are not on your account, your meeting is ended. So be careful with that. I'll put the actual floating mini bar right on top of that one. Look at that. Dock to top. If I click this, you can see that it goes up to the top of the screen and it will float up to the top. If I uncheck that, it will come to some other place, but I can always move it around. So now I've got it there. You are screen sharing. It will tell you how long your session has been, whether you are muted, and whether you are in a secure connection or not. And then there's the stop share. Now, if I go to stop share and click there, the other things come alive on my screen. I'm going to share one more time. And I'm going to go to my 4-screen mode. And so you can see this is my lower right screen, upper right screen, upper left, lower left. If I click stop share, a couple of things happen and things change. So that's most of the controls that you can use when you are a host of an active meeting. Thanks for watching this technical presentation by the HOA Coach. I'm Ray Harwood. We'll see you next time.